I'm going to finish reading the book. Climb up here, Tiny, and don't squish Baby. Beauty, do you have any idea where Buddy... Oh, there you are, Buddy. Come along. Let's read the book. A few days later, there was a knock on the woodcarver's door. He smoothed down his hair as he went to answer it. At the door were the widow and her son. "May I watch again?" asked Thomas. As Mrs. McDowell warmed the tea and put a plate of fresh molasses cookies on the workbench, Thomas watched the woodcarver work on a figure of an angel. After a very long time, Thomas spoke. "Mr. Toomey, excuse me, is that my angel you're carving?" "Yes, and would you do me the favor of telling me exactly what I'm doing wrong?" "Well, my angel looked like one of God's most important angels because it was sent to baby Jesus." "And just how does one make an angel look important?" asked the woodcarver. "Well, you'll be able to do it," said Thomas. "You're the best woodcarver in the whole valley." After another very long time, Thomas spoke. "Mr. Toomey, excuse me, may I ask a question?" "Do you ever stop talking?" "Mother says I don't. She says I could learn a lot about the virtue of silence from you." Under his beard, the woodcarver's face turned pink. The widow McDowell's face turned as red as the scarf she was knitting. "Well, speak up. What's your question?" "Will you teach me how to carve?" "I'm a very busy man. But," he put down the very important angel, "you will carve a bird." "A robin, I hope," Thomas said. "I love robins." With a piece of charcoal, the woodcarver sketched a robin on a piece of brown paper. He handed Thomas a small block of pine and a knife. Then he showed him how to lop the corners from the block and slowly smooth the edges of the wood into curves. Thomas copied the woodcarver's strokes, head bent, tongue working from side to side of his lower lip as he concentrated. When the church bells chimed 6 o'clock, Jonathan Toomey was holding Thomas's hand and guiding the knife along the edge of the wing. He didn't even hear the ringing. The widow McDowell said it was time to leave. Thomas brushed wood shavings from his shirt. Then he reached out a hand and brushed 2 especially large pieces of wood shaving from Jonathan Toomey's beard. He thanked the woodcarver for teaching him how to carve. Later, after a supper of boiled potatoes and molasses cookies, Jonathan Toomey went to his workbench. He thought for a long time. He sketched drawing after drawing. Finally, he picked up his carving knife and picked up the angel and carved until his eyelids drooped shut. A few days later, there was a knock at the woodcarver's door. Mr. Toomey jumped up to answer it. There stood the widow McDowell with a bouquet of pine boughs and holly sprigs dotted with berries. And there stood Thomas, clutching his partially carved robin. While Thomas and Mr. Toomey carved, Mrs. McDowell put the bouquet in a jar of water. She scrubbed the kitchen table and set the jar in the center on a pretty cloth embroidered with lilies of the valley and daisies, which she had found in the drawer below the cupboard. "Next I will carve the wise men and Joseph," the woodcarver said to Thomas. "Perhaps, before I begin, you will tell me the mistakes I'm going to make." "Well," said Thomas, "my wise men were wearing their most wonderful robes because they were going to visit baby Jesus. And my Joseph was leaning over baby Jesus like he was protecting him. He looked very serious." It wasn't until the church bells had chimed and the widow and her son were preparing to go that Mr. Toomey saw the jar of pine boughs, the scrubbed table, and the cloth. "I found the cloth in the drawer. I thought it would look pretty on the table," the widow said, smiling. "Never open that drawer!" The woodcarver was harsh. When the two left, Jonathan put the cloth away. That evening, after supper of boiled potatoes, the woodcarver worked on Joseph and the wise men until his eyelids drooped shut. A few days later, there was a knock at the woodcarver's door. He dusted the crumbs from his beard, brushed the tar from his shirt, and at the door were the widow McDowell and Thomas. All afternoon, Thomas watched the woodcarver work. When it was time to leave, Jonathan said to Thomas, "I am about to begin the last two figures, Mary and the baby. Can you tell me how your figures looked?" "Oh, they were the most special of all," said Thomas. "Jesus was smiling and reaching up to his mother, and Mary looked like she loved him very much." "Thank you, Thomas. Tomorrow is Christmas. Is there any chance the figures will be ready?" asked the widow. "They will be ready when they are ready." "I understand." She handed Jonathan 2 packages. "Merry Christmas," she said. Jonathan folded his arms across his chest. "I want no presents." "That's exactly why we're giving them," answered the widow. She put them on the table and left. Inside the first package was a red scarf, hand-knit, warm and bright. He tied the scarf around his neck. The other package held a robin, crudely carved of pine. A smile twitched at the corners of Jonathan's mouth as he ran his fingers over the lopsided wings. He dusted the fireplace mantel with his sleeve and placed the robin exactly in the center, where he could look at it from his chair. The woodcarver did not eat any supper that day. Instead, he began to sketch the final figures, Mary and Jesus. He drew Mary, wadded up the sketch, and tossed it on the floor. Drew the baby, wadded that sketch into a ball, tossed it with the first. He sketched again. Once more he crumpled the paper. Soon there was a small mountain of crumpled paper at his feet. He picked up a block of wood and tried to carve, but the knife would not do what he wanted it to. He hurled the chunk of wood in the fireplace and sat staring into the flames. When he heard the church bells announce midnight, he got up slowly, opened the drawer beneath the cupboard and that he had told the widow to never open. From it he took the cloth embroidered with lilies of the valley and daisies. He took out a rough wooden shawl and a lace handkerchief. He took out a tiny white baby blanket and a little pair of blue socks. He placed each piece gently on the floor. From the bottom of the drawer he lifted out a picture frame, beautifully carved of deep brown chestnut. In the frame was a charcoal sketch of a woman sitting in a rocking chair holding a baby. The baby's arms were reaching out, touching the woman's face. The woman was looking down at the baby, smiling. Jonathan sat down in his rocking chair and held the picture against his chest. He rocked slowly, his eyes closed. 2 tears trailed into his beard. When he finally took the picture to his workbench and began to carve, his fingers worked quickly and surely. He carved all through the night. The next day there was a knock at the widow McDowell's door. When she opened it, there stood the woodcarver, his neck wrapped in the red scarf, holding a wooden box stuffed with straw. "Mr. Toomey," said the widow, "what a surprise! Merry Christmas!" "The figures are ready," he said as he stepped inside. From the box, Jonathan unpacked 2 curly sheep, happy sheep, because they were with Jesus. He unpacked a proud cow and an angel, a very important angel with mighty wings stretching from its shoulders right down to the hem of his gown. He unpacked 3 wise men wearing their most wonderful robes, edged with fur and falling into rich folds. He unpacked a serious and caring Joseph. He unpacked Mary wearing a rough woolen shawl and looking down lovingly at her precious son. Jesus was smiling and reaching up to touch his mother's face. That day, Jonathan went to the Christmas service with the widow McDowell and Thomas. And that day in the churchyard, the village children saw Jonathan throw back his head, showing his eyes as clear as an August sky, and laugh. And no one ever called him Mr. Gloomy. again.